Hi everyone, this is Penny from Whack-A-Witch Astrology, here today to talk to you about the strengths and the weaknesses of the sign Gemini. So I asked on Facebook for both positive and negative reviews on what it's actually like to date a Gemini, since I myself actually don't have a ton of experience dating Gemini, which is weird because I have basically dated everyone, and I have been on, I think, just one date with one Gemini, and then I've had other Geminis who have kind of tried to ask me out and other stuff, and you know what, it just wasn't going anywhere. I pretty much found exactly what I personally expected when I asked other people about the sign Gemini. And I know we hear so many negative stereotypes about the sign Gemini. It's probably one of the most frequently complained about signs in the astrological community. And I don't know if it's just because my Mars is in Gemini and, you know, I already read them like a book, basically. And that's why I haven't necessarily had any problems. But I think even the people who did have problems with Gemini had a problem that I would have suspected. And the very problem that I assumed would be a problem that had prevented me from ever dating any Geminis. So let's get started with their strengths and their weaknesses. First of all, they are stubborn. And I know this isn't a trait that's normally associated with Geminis, but let's face it, they are. They don't seem that stubborn upon first glance, but when you really get down to the nitty-gritty of it, you realize that trying to convince a Gemini of anything, or really just trying to communicate a point to them, a lot of times is like trying to communicate it to two different people that are merged into one, and then you have to get through these two separate layers of a person in order to convince them of anything. So they are actually, to me, probably the most stubborn sign. I know in my previous videos I said it was Taurus, but Gemini totally upstaged them and took the cake when it came to stubbornness because of what I have discovered. So Gemini's stubbornness actually comes from having two heads. Boop, because they're the twins. On the positive side of this is something that makes them very interesting. It's something that makes them very dynamic, and that's part of why they enjoy talking to people so much and why they have so many interesting things to be able to share with us, why they have so many interesting things to talk about. But on the negative side of things, it can be dang near impossible to get them to understand your point of view because they already have so many different points of views of their own. Now, when it actually comes to relationships, yeah, that struggle in getting a point across to them and getting them to understand your point of view, it's going to be a reoccurring problem pretty much all throughout the relationship. On the positive end of things, and this is like so against all the Gemini stereotypes, but Geminis actually are very consistent and very loyal partners once they have decided on a person. But here's the thing, if they haven't decided on that person, if they haven't come to that final decision, that final verdict, then nothing good is going to come out of the relationship. That's just what it is. And I think a lot of people get caught up with Gemini when they're still in that deciding phase, like, oh, the Gemini was interested in me. Well, I'm going to go ahead and give this Gemini a chance. I'm going to pursue them. I'm going to become interested in them romantically. And that Gemini is still like in the deciding phase, still like working their way through it. And then by the time the Gemini decides, you know, I'm not feeling it, that person, that victim, if you will feel like they were already led on. So that's why we have all these stories about Geminis leading people on, and, you know, Geminis who will go through like 5 different relationships in a year or whatever it is. If you're curious, you can actually go on Facebook and read some of the comments. They are public, so I appreciate those contributions that we have there. But that's what's actually happening. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we had plenty of people commenting, I've been with a Gemini for 5 years. I've been with a Gemini for 10 years. I've been with a Gemini for 16 years, and it's always been amazing. And then we have a few people who, you know, lost the love of their life who is a Gemini, and they're never getting that Gemini back. At least I don't think they are. I mean, Geminis can be a little bit back and forth, but you have to realize if they're being back and forth about something, it's because they haven't actually decided yet. Because Geminis are way more stubborn than you may initially expect. The next trait of Gemini is that they are open-minded. They might have two heads, but they're totally open-minded about everything. So on the positive end of that is if you need a change in the relationship, you need anything to start happening differently, then your Gemini partner is going to be totally receptive to that. They're going to be open to hearing new ideas all the way throughout the relationship. Even 10 years in, they're still willing to change things up, and that can really keep things interesting. And that's really good for anyone who doesn't want to be the same person for every single decade of their life. Now, on the flip side of this, you have to actually understand what it is you want, because you have to be able to get them to understand what it is you want. And you have to be very firm and very comprehensive in your understanding of what it is you wanted, so you can be specific, so that you can communicate clearly. Because if you're not, the Gemini is going to leave that open to interpretation. And that's part of being open-minded, seeing that things are open to interpretation. So if there's any room left for speculation, let's be honest, Gemini people, sometimes they'll just run with it. And they'll take in the information, it'll seem like they're really listening, but they're just going to come to a totally different conclusion other than what it was you actually meant to communicate. So you need to be really clear on what it is you want in your relationship with your Gemini. Now, another thing about Gemini being open-minded is a lot of times they play devil's advocate, and they might question you a lot, and it might feel like they're challenging you. It might feel like they don't agree with you on things, but as long as you don't get offended by that, it's not really a problem. The next thing about Gemini is that they are problem solvers. How many times has a Gemini totally saved your ass? Whether it's your Gemini friend, your Gemini mother, your Gemini boyfriend, your Gemini girlfriend, whoever it is, I've totally had more than one Gemini save my ass more than one time in my life. Definitely 2 Geminis have saved my ass, like for real. And then at least one other Gemini has kind of like borderline like saved my ass when I was like in a kind of oh shit moment. I don't really know what to do right now. So since Geminis are so good at problem solvers, that's part of what allows them to have long-term relationships. Whenever there's a problem, they know how to fix it. Whether it's a money problem, whether it's a communication problem, whether it's a lifestyle problem, or things maybe just got boring and they're not interesting anymore, Gemini is so good at solving those problems. But on the negative end of things, the reason why Gemini is so good at solving problems is because they have a habit of creating them. And I feel like they kind of have to learn to be good at solving problems in order to fix the mistakes throughout life and fix the things that haven't gone wrong. They're a very experimental and very inquisitive type of sign, so they get into trouble sometimes. Will Gemini be able to solve the problem they have just created? Tune in next week for another episode of Gemini and Friends. Okay, the next thing is totally an opinion, because I had people commenting saying the opposite of this, and I realized that. But my opinion is that Gemini is totally weird. Gemini tends to be interested in those like random obscure facts, those fascinating, really abnormal scientific discoveries, those super niche things like YouTube SEO. They just know so many like interesting things. And honestly, when it comes to like sexual and romantic stuff too, I've heard some pretty weird like fetishes and pretty weird inquiries coming from Gemini when it comes to like romantic stuff and all that. I definitely think Gemini is weird. And I'm not judging. Again, I'm never judging, because I'm freaking weird too. Like, it takes one to know one, honestly. But on the positive end of that, Gemini is always interesting. And I know I've already said this, but I mean, I feel like if you want just like an average, plain anybody who's like never going to speak their mind, never going to challenge your opinions, someone who's just going to be quiet and just cooperate, then obviously Gemini's not going to be for you. I can't think of anyone, like any celebrities or anyone who's a Gemini and who's just a trophy wife. You know, one of those wives who like looks pretty and just stands there and doesn't talk. I love Geminis because they're like always expressing their opinions. They're always bringing new things to the table. But on the negative side of that, because Gemini is kind of truly unusual in a lot of ways that I think get taken for granted, one of the things that that encompasses is that they put their head above their heart. You know, they make decisions with their head, and they have so much going on cognitively, so much stuff being challenged, being questioned, like light bulbs going off, things buzzing around in their head, that a lot of times they're not like actually paying attention to the heart, to the emotional matters, to what their intuition's actually telling us. And when it comes to relationships, our intuition usually does tell us who is the right person and who isn't. But Geminis get caught up in their head, and they get so conflicted about that kind of thing, and it becomes like a big challenge for them, a big obstacle. They become massive heartbreakers because of it, and then we see people complaining about their Gemini cousin who broke their friend's heart, who dated their friend's sister, and like all kinds of crazy stuff like that, because those certain Geminis just can't make up their freaking mind. So a lot of people interpret that phenomena, that is the Gemini personality, as them being insensitive or them being shallow. I don't really think that's necessarily true, but I do understand why it comes across that way. And as an astrologer, I always look for like the deeper hidden aspects of people's personalities. Like, what is actually going on? What is actually lying beneath the surface? And that's something that I always like to point out, and something I think I've become known for pointing out, the things that other people have been missing. So anyway, that was my video on Gemini's strengths and weaknesses. Make sure you are subscribed, that you have hit the notification bell, and that you are following me on Facebook too, because if you are, you saw the awesome moon sign hoodies that I designed. And I'm really trying to get to a point where I actually can profit off of the amount of time that I spend creating content, which I don't know if it's ever going to happen. Most of my income has come from doing readings, and making content doesn't, especially content that's for free, doesn't translate to me making more money doing readings. So that's something that I'm trying to accomplish, and I'm trying to figure it out. There's been some trial and error with that. But if you like the hoodies that I made, not only do you get an awesome, cool hoodie that you get to wear and you get to show your pride for your moon sign, but you're also going to get to support me and my confusing life path. So thank you for watching. Links are in the description, both for my hoodies and for my website, where you can have your natal chart calculated and all kinds of stuff. So maybe it's not the hoodies, but maybe something else you're interested in will catch your eye when you visit those links. Bye. Testing. Oh, I'm here today to la 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 la. Well, let's see. Is it working now? How's it doing?